everyone, thank you for joining me this week. I wanted to talk to you about a particular type of brush that I use quite a bit. It's called a chisel brush as opposed to a round brush. So it refers to the shape of the neck. It's either round or it's squashed flat. So that's a chisel brush, but you'll see they've got different heads. And here we have what's called a dagger brush with the beveled chisel. Here we have a filbert, which has got a nice soft edge, rounded edge. And lastly here we've got the flat top chisel, which has completely self-explanatory flat top. So these are the three main types of chisel brushes that I use, and each for a specific reason. Well, this one in particular I just like using because usually when I'm painting, I don't want a point here or here. So that means when I'm using a flat chisel, I'm going to get heavier pressure at these two edges, and that perhaps can cause lines or streaks in my washes. So if I'm painting something like this, which is, oops, upside down, which is a really nice soft blend, I would be more likely to use this or my round brush than something like this. But the reason why I have these brushes is because for particular things, there's nothing better to use than these shaped bristles. Why do we need both? Well, in particular, the angle of this one is very handy for working. So if you imagine you're doing the painting and you've got that flat edge on your paper, it's very easy to hold it that way. Whereas with a chisel, then you're holding it very, very vertically and hovering over the work that you may have just done. That's one of the first reasons. So I'm going to go through and demonstrate how I would use these brushes and show you particularly the effects and the ease at which you can create these shapes. So first one for me would be brickwork. And the reason why is because it gives you a very consistent shape. Now, this is a very soft bristle, so this would be my least used one. It's very good for hair, which I'll demonstrate later. But when you have a beveled chisel and it's more of a firm shape, this bristle is much firmer. So this is a softer synthetic, this is a firmer, heavier, harder synthetic. And the reason is because you'll get a very, very firm fixed edge. Great for bricks. Also good for fence palings. So you can start this way and drag it down. Use it on its side for very good fine lines. And also if you're doing something that needs an edge, then you can't go past that shape. So the main reason for me using these is particularly the shape that they will give you with a lot of ease. You're not poking around trying to fix things up. The second thing is it's almost like a calligraphy pen where you have a wide edge option on one side and a very, very thin, fine edge on the other side. So the good thing about that is something like hair, where I want a wider edge and then I want to really thicken it and bring it back down. So when I'm thinking of doing any portraiture or hair, this is one of the brushes that if I'm really getting into a detailed one, I will grab as I finish off the hair. In the beginning I tend to just use a round brush, but yeah, just good to experiment with. If you're thinking of getting one, this is one of the things that you'll get help with using them for. This is basically structure. Keeping on with that though is buildings. So when I've got a building, say I've got this side here, shade side, so anything that has structure, you're going to get that nice repetition. So if it's got a tiled roof, and then I can really, really accentuate shapes because they're perfectly repetitive because I can count on the shape of the bristles of the brush giving me the same mark over and over again. Now, that's the bevel chisel as opposed to the flat top. And the flat top is got the same sort of uses. I mean, I could have interchanged these very easily. And as I said, it's just the way you hold it in your hand. But the flat top chisel also has a very, very good shape making ability. So if you are doing buildings, because it's flat, you can get away with just making a mark, and whereas this one you have to get the angle set correctly, well, this one you're just looking at that straight and dragging it across. So much, much more helpful if you're doing a lot of repetitive shapes and you're trying to build something up with repetitive shape. If it was me with this one, I tend to use it for floor surfaces because it doesn't matter too much about flattening this brush. You need to see that angle, so you do have to flatten it. With this one, being that it's totally squared off at the back, you can literally use it quite flat to the page. I'm just going to do some random colour here to show you. I'm just going to wait for that to dry a little bit. We could put some beams hanging out from this roof. We could put a chimney up the top. It's very good to do buildings in general. If I was doing a little area back here and I wanted some dark windows, I might go and downsize and go to a smaller chisel. So then for this one, thinking of using it in those two different ways, then I'm actually able to go, right, I'm going to do it like a stiletto, and that is giving me really straight and sharp lines. Then I can go in and easily shade at that angle to give me variation. So doing things like stonework, sandstone, anything on a flat surface, beams on a ceiling, you know, all that sort of thing, I'd probably go with this one rather than the beveled one because it's easy to maintain a really, really square edge. So then to compare, my filbert brush is not going to give me any hard edges. I'm just going to wet this, or actually I won't wet all of it, show you wet on wet, and then wet on dry. So wet on wet, I can move around. I've got no real definitive shape coming out. And then wet on dry, it's giving me that sort of curve if I want to do something conical. Or I can do an edge and think, well, I don't have that really hard corner happening. It's always going to soften off on the edges. So this for me is a good basic wash brush that I can lay down tones and colour with in the beginning. And then perhaps that's something I might come over with and define a really sharp point or take some colour out with a brush like this. This being a thicker one, it still can give me a fine edge, but because the corners are missing, you're really only touching the page with that tiny bit in the middle. So when you do something, you've got to keep it very vertical and moving the entire time to keep a more consistent line. Whereas when you've got something like this with a flat top, you literally can put your hand down and just drag your arm, and you're getting a much better consistent line. It's much easier to paint with. So even if I was hovering above the page and put my hand down on the paper for stability, I could still go, you know what, I'm getting a pretty good consistent line just because this is a really firm bristle, and because look at how thin that line is, it's giving me a really nice edge. So let me know if you have any difficulties understanding these brushes. They do have a place in your quiver of brushes, but it's not something you would use all the time. So I'm now thinking like curtains. You know, if I was doing curtains, I would have thick and thin, and then you could finish off the bottom and then wash over it, and that would look like curtains, and then you've got a curtain rod, nice and square at the top. Let me know which one you prefer and why, and also, do you even have a filbert brush? If you've got a flat head chisel, do you even use a filbert brush? So here is a very fast speed of me doing a little painting using only my chisel brushes, and I hope you enjoy it and even have a go at it. In fact, just watching this back is making me want to go and put that movie on called The Holiday with Cameron Diaz and Jude Law. It's about that time of the year as well. I might have to make one of these, but a snowy version. All right, thank you, my lovely people. I really appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing and liking and sharing and commenting and all the wonderful things you do for me. I appreciate you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. Bye.